Hello, everyone. I'm Veena Aiyer, founder and CEO of QRKIEZ, and today we have Jacob Levy, our guest. Jacob is a career coach, special educator, and speaker helping job seekers with different abilities. Hi, Jacob. Really nice to have you today, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
Hey, Veena, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm really excited to discuss.
Awesome. So before we jump in, let me talk a bit about QRKIEZ. We are developing a platform for neurodivergent individuals, families, and professionals. Our goal is to help neurodivergent community find friendship, mentorship, discover services, and job opportunities. You can learn more about us at www.quirkies.com. One of our mission is give voice to neurodivergent community, and that's why we are talking to neurodivergent folks and allies with the hope that their incredible stories is going to uplift the community. With that, let's jump in. So, Jacob, you identify as neurodivergent. So, when did you or your family first got to know about it, and what was the initial reaction?
So I I actually acquired a disability at birth due to hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus essentially literally means water on the brain. So essentially a brain hemorrhage. I have a twin sister, so of a twin sister of typical development. Um, I didn't really understand it for quite a while, to be honest, because I was so young. I would go to all these um like neurologist appointments, neurosurgeons, and then I would be taking all these tests. I didn't really understand what was going on. But then as I got older, like I had an IEP in school and um I was in the gen ed classroom like my entire K through 12. But I would have like little things like extended time on tests, extended time on like state tests.
Hmm.
And then, I would get like put in a separate room.
Hmm.
So that's when I started to question. I'm like, why am I getting kind of excluded, so to speak? Um, so yeah, it kind of like unfolded. It was kind of like a slow process, just like discovering who I am, really.
That's nice.
It wasn't like one particular incident. It was just it kind of felt like a little, now that I'm looking back at 41, it felt like a little taboo.
Wow.
Like nobody really talked about it because my I have two siblings. They're of typical development. And yeah, it kind of, now that I'm looking back, like it nobody really talked about it with me, to be honest.
That's interesting. So, would you have preferred if people openly spoke about it? You would have felt less excluded?
Looking back, and to be, now that I'm an advocate for others, 1,000% yes. Like, yeah, it's a difficult subject. I'm not saying it gets any easier, but what I am saying is that we have to stop looking at it like it's a taboo, right? It's not like, there are taboo subjects, yes, in the world, absolutely, but like this is one that is ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
I think I can't remember if it's the US or the world, but I think it's 1 in 4
Yeah,
people
one in
have
four or 1 in 6. Yeah.
have a disability. That's a massive percentage.
Yeah.
That's a quarter. That's a very massive percentage. So why, like, I don't think it's something you can sweep under the rug anymore. With laws in place, ADA, IDEA, like everything in place, like it's present, it exists. So it's not something that we should shun away from anymore.
That's a great point. And any families you're hearing, like if you have a kid, this is a great point to note that talk about it openly. Don't make them feel that something wrong with them. It's a taboo subject. Nobody speaks about it. Probably having an open conversation would be much better for your child. Thanks, Jacob, for sharing that. I think that's a great insight. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your adulthood. I know you originally studied music, and
Yes.
but now you're transitioned into a career coach. So tell us more about like what inspired you to start helping others and change your career.
Sure. So yeah, so I went to school for music. I've always been very gravitated towards music. As a kid, I took piano lessons. And I hated practicing, by the way. I didn't like have the attention span, but I would literally just sit at a piano. I would hear a song on the radio, no music, no sheet music, and I would just play it
Wow.
like by ear. So I realized I had good ears. Um, and I don't know. I think I've always been like a very kind person, very helpful, nurturing, things like that. So I think it's pretty appropriate that like I went into special education. I was a sped teacher for a while. Um, and being a sped teacher and being a career coach, it can be very similar. Like I literally utilize a lot of the same techniques from like my teacher toolbox that I do with career coaching. It's very, very parallel.
That's cool. Can you like touch more about it? Like, what exactly do you focus on when you're working with neurodivergent job seekers?
Sure, sure. So, for example, in special education, there's something that's called like an interest inventory,
Hmm.
right? We want to understand, like in an IEP, like we want to understand, like what are a student's strengths and weaknesses.
Hmm.
Well, in order to understand that, I also want to know, like, what are their interests, because there's a connection with that. So in career coaching, I also like to know, what are your strengths and weaknesses, because that can align with a specific career path.
Hmm.
If you're a visual person, if you're a creative person, like a musician, um, you may not like analysis, right?
Uh-huh.
There's a term called like analysis paralysis,
Yeah.
which is me 100,000%. I don't like analyzing stuff, but I do like numbers because music and math tend to be on like the same side of the
Yeah,
brain.
that's true.
So understanding and like there's a term that gets thrown around being like self-aware
Hmm.
is of vital importance. Um, just like understanding who you are, what makes you tick. You could take as many assessments as you want, but like at the end of the day, you know what like lights your fire, right? Like what lights a fire in your belly, like what gets you excited. And doing like little, it doesn't have to be anything technical. It could just be like, let's make a list of your likes and dislikes, right? Very basic, which I've done that as an educator too, but it can really transfer over effectively in terms of like people that just graduated college or even just graduated high school and they don't want to do the school route. They want to just get to work.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. There are a lot of parallels with being an educator and a coach.
That's awesome. And what you touched upon is as a career coach, you help them understand what are their likes, dislikes, and interests so that they can narrow down on different career options. So, what is like the first piece of advice you give to neurodivergent job seekers? Because it's quite likely like they might have not gone through that process themselves. They have not figured out what they want to do. Is that the case, or usually, they know what they want, and that's when they come to you?
It's varied. So if they don't know what they want to do, I don't always suggest working with a career coach right off the bat,
Mhm.
because so there's people get career coach and like job coach mixed up. A job coach is someone that can work with you like on the job. I don't necessarily do that. So
Okay.
career coach is kind of everything before you get a job, right? So like a resume, a LinkedIn profile, how to market yourself, how to create content. So that's all the before in order to seek out a job, which I think honestly that's a little bit more interesting because you're marketing yourself. You're creating a brand for yourself. A lot of people have no idea how to do that. The easiest thing I can suggest, and a lot of people think it's like a daunting task, um, create a single post just explaining who you are,
Hmm.
kind of like like an intro to a resume, kind of like a cover letter, but just explain who you are, a little background about yourself, what you're seeking. Um, it might seem very basic, but the reason why you should do an intro post on a platform like LinkedIn is because so there's, I would say, well over 1 billion people on LinkedIn
Yeah.
globally. It's
Yeah.
massive. And what people don't realize, first of all, there's so much like garbage on the internet, right? That's just, it's the internet. But people don't understand, so that people get this stigma about social media in general, which a lot of it is accurate. But LinkedIn, I would say, is the most like professional network. Like it's business professionals. It's either small businesses that are selling a product or a service, or job seekers. Like not a whole lot in between. Um, so what job seekers don't realize, that you can have 0 followers and 0 connections. You don't have to be connected to anyone. If you make a post, that post is live on a platform of 1 billion people. So technically, anyone can find your post, a lot of times by keywords. So that's why I always say, do an intro post. What are your interests? What are your likes? Where did you go to school? What are your skills? Because people search for those words.
Yeah.
They don't need to know your first name. They don't need to know your last name. They just, a lot of times, hiring managers, recruiters, whatever, they'll search for generic keywords like job titles, cities, skills, certifications, software, languages spoken, things like that. So you can get found by hypothetically, by a desired employer when you talk about yourself, your strengths, LinkedIn is a platform where, like, I always tell job seekers, like, you have to give to the platform if you want to receive. People have it twisted. They'll just ask.
Yeah.
But it's like, what are you giving? You have to give first. And when I say give, I mean, like, give your value.
Yeah.
What is your value that you're giving to this world? Right? I mean, digitally. And you got to give it if you want to get anything in return.
That's such a great insight. And if there are any job seekers who are listening to it, I think that's a great point. You can definitely use that suggestion. So, Jacob, in your work, can you talk about or share about a particular success story where, you know, a neurodivergent person was able to find their dream job and has done really well professionally?
Yes. I have one person in particular that I'm like so happy. Um, so this gentleman, he is on the autism spectrum. And he called me. He was like really struggling, like emotionally. He was seeking professional help, and he really wanted to find a new job. He was working on his like software engineering chops, like pivoting, and he was looking at a lot of my content, and then he called me. He's like, I would like help with your services. So we started working together, and when you work with anybody, like, you don't really understand the depth
Mm,
of them as a person. I mean, one, like, I work with people like all over the world, remotely.
mm,
So I only know an inkling about them, which is fine. Um, and I didn't know like all the other layers that came with it. And what you realize, whether you're a coach or an educator, you wear so many different hats
yeah.
that you don't even realize. Like, oh, I didn't know I just happened to be a therapist, right? I mean, I'm not a therapist, but like, some of the things that I'm deploying can be therapeutic in nature. It's a lot of listening, a
Mm,
lot of asking questions. Um, so this gentleman, he actually, I figured out a way to get him a role at Amazon, one of the
wow.
largest tech firms in the world. And he lived on one part of the country, and they were able to, after like a lot of back and forth, Amazon actually has like one of the most inclusive organizations I've ever seen. Like, I mean, they run a tight ship, but I was very impressed with like their DEI practices. Um, and they actually, like, after a few interviews, he did receive accommodations, with the interview, and he got the job. Not only did he get the job, I kind of like coached him on how to negotiate. Um, they paid for his relocation from
Wow.
one coast to the other. And so you're talking about your question earlier about, what do you suggest for job seekers? My biggest thing, I'm a huge proponent of like documenting your journey on LinkedIn, right? Whether it's like specifically with content, right? It could be audio, video, written, whatever. Um, and that's actually a line I took from Gary Vaynerchuk. He's an unbelievable marketer. He basically tells people to like document your process, right? Document your journey. And so it's really interesting because a lot of people on the autism spectrum, sometimes they don't understand like social cues, like taking things seriously, or taking like when somebody's being sarcastic, things like that. But when I said document your process, he took it to an entirely different level. And I was like totally blown, like in a good way. I was totally blown away. He created a brand out of rubber ducks.
Wow.
He created a brand out of rubber ducks. And apparently, I'm not a software engineer, but apparently it's a thing where like software engineers, they put little rubber duckies next to their desk. I don't know why. It's just a thing. And like he took it to the nth degree, and he created a whole following just by using rubber duckies. He's like an amateur videographer, and he made somehow rubber ducks like come to life. He made music videos with rubber ducks. But he also wove in his studies of being a software engineer. So he was able to merge the two. And now he has a crazy following of like 1,000 people on his Slack channel at Amazon. And his whole theme is rubber ducks. It's incredible.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so he is definitely my ultimate success story. We still keep in contact. We talk all the time. He refers people to me. Like he is incredible.
That's so awesome. And really happy to hear about that. Jacob, you mentioned a little bit about organizations and like Amazon specifically and the inclusive practice and accommodation. So can you touch a little bit more about what you think are the various accommodation organizations today are doing or should do? Because I do feel there has been an explosion of awareness recently. And I believe a lot of corporates are trying to be more neuro-inclusive. So do you think enough work has been done or there has to be more work that needs to be done? Your thoughts on that?
I think there's always more work to be done. I think the book is never closed on accommodations, modifications, etc. Also because like the word disability is a spectrum in and of itself. So it can never be done. I mean, I think there's even new disabilities that nobody's ever heard of, right? And so they're still diagnosing and understanding and gathering data. I mean, I think one of the most powerful things a company can do is, this might sound harsh, but just be quiet and listen. Just listen to I mean, don't be quiet all the time, but just like ask, what do you need to be successful? Like, what do you need? Tools? Do you need modifications? Do you need a screen reader? Do you need this? Like, make them very available. And that could have to do with like the screening process. Can we make a more simple like Google form? You could have 27 boxes, but also have an area where like somebody can expand in complete sentences. Like, this is exactly what I need. Right. Yeah, I mean, that's just been my experience. That's the thing with disability. Like, everybody has different needs, just like neurotypical folks. Everybody's got needs. It's just a matter of like, you have to give people space. You have to give them that like kind of a safe space to speak your mind in a respectful manner.
That's a great point. So one thing that I've seen or heard is people are sometimes fearful. They think if they go and disclose their neurodivergence or different abilities and ask for accommodation, it would be like a negative points against them, especially during interview process, and probably they might not be considered. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, is there a way or is there like a list of companies somewhere that people should go and figure that out, that these are the companies which will be more open to it? Or is it like just the way you ask just so that you're not excluded from the process itself, because that's an idea, it's a taboo, as you said in the beginning, like, oh my god, this person is going to be difficult.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's I believe it's the DEI index. It's a list of I can't remember, like 50 or 100 US companies that they have a score. They have an index score based on accommodations, modifications. There's a whole list of things, and it'll tell you what their score is from best to worst in the whole country. That's one thing to do. Another thing is like can you repeat the last part again?
So basically, is there a way to ask for accommodations? Because, there's a fear, right?
Yes.
Like, oh my God, if
Okay.
I come across too direct or whatever.
So sorry, it's been a long morning.
No worries.
Okay, so there's a few things that get put in place, right? So there's always that like EEOC box on a job application, right? Do you have a disability? You can choose, yes, I have a disability. I choose not to disclose, blah blah blah. That's one way to do it. You don't have to say anything. There's also a way that now I do suggest job seekers do this, but it's not mandatory. What I did, I got so sick and tired of like the disclosure process. I kind of like threw my hands up in the air because sometimes they get the notifications, sometimes they don't. I started like in terms of content on LinkedIn, because I want to get visible, right? I'm not going to put disability on my resume, especially like I have an invisible disability. So I started documenting content of like what I do as an educator. I was a trainer at the time, but I also wove in the fact that I also have a learning disability. And what happens, and I suggest everybody do this, at least in terms of like your subject matter expertise, document your expertise or your learning journey, right? If you're pivoting, in bite-sized, digestible pieces of content. The reason being, and it's a very targeted reason, is because a post is very searchable. It's very SEO friendly, right? Your resume is not so SEO friendly, right? Because a lot of times it's a PDF, it's a locked document. Nobody can type in Jacob Levy's resume and it pops up on LinkedIn. It doesn't really work like that. But any word on a post is very SEO friendly. That's why if you document your expertise, you're automatically embedding those keywords, which a lot of time are from a job description.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have 10 years of experience in XYZ. I'm good at doing this, blah, blah. Those keywords tend to come out in your content when you're documenting what you do. And so, like I said, what I did, I would fuse into the fact that I also have a disability. What it did for me, I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but what it did for me is it started to attract those companies that are inclusive, and it would repel those companies that are not, because I'm not hiding anything. It's kind of like a preemptive strike.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, I don't want to go through the whole rigmarole process of applying and interviewing if the company's not inclusive anyway.
That's true. It's not
Because
going to
I've already
benefit you.
been through it. It's a pain. It's exhausting. It's physically and emotionally exhausting. So I went the other way and I started to document. And so what happened was companies and people with disabilities started to reach out to me because I have no idea who they are, but they found me. Now, I don't know the algorithm that well, but like people could search for whatever words they want.
Yeah.
So some people do search for disability, learning disability, ADHD, ADD, dysgraphia. So people search for things. It's a massive Google search. It's a massive Google. So if job seekers and employers start to think of it that way, and you start documenting, you can really expand your visibility on a platform like LinkedIn.
That's true. And the great point that you touched is you're almost like self-selecting and eliminating people or companies that probably is not a good fit. Like, what's the point? You go through that process, and even if you get a job, probably you're not going to be happy. So it's better that you're very open about your abilities, and you're only working or talking to people who are inclusive and understanding about
Right. And I will reiterate again, because I already know what people are going to say. They're like, well, I don't feel comfortable disclosing my disability on a public platform. I totally understand that. That's why I just talked about my experience.
That's true.
So it's not mandatory by any means. You can seek out employers ahead of time before you interview with them. There's a thing called an informational interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can, a lot of company websites, it'll talk about their culture and this and that, but that's great. So you could just copy paste it all day long. You can actually like contact HR, right? Contact talent acquisitions, actually ask them these questions, right? Do a personalized invite, do a DM, whatever, because you don't want to waste your time. You get into an interview setting or you even get the job and then, the stuff hits the fan.
That's true. Thanks, Jacob. I think that's so informative, and I believe people who are hearing this would learn a lot specifically of your tips and suggestions and how they can stand out, how they can document the process, their journey, and also asking for accommodation, finding those right companies that have those inclusive policies. That's so great. We touched upon a lot of different topics. Is there anything else that you would really like to share with the community, which I've not asked so far?
The last thing I want to say, I created this quote during the pandemic that it really like summed up, whenever I hear the word disability, and I got a lot of flack for it too, but I still believe in it. What I learned about growing up with an invisible disability, a disability is not an inability to do something. I believe it's an opportunity to go a certain path. And it's on that path where novel and new ideas exist.
True. That's so true. Thanks, Jacob. I think it was so inspiring. And, people, you can, as I said, join QRKIEZ.com and where you can find these inspiring blogs and stories. And we hope to continue to talk to inspiring people like Jacob and bring you these insights. Thank you so much, Jacob, for having us. It was great talking to you. Take care.
Thanks so much, Veena.